So we have an amazing panel right now, right here, right in front of us. We're going to be talking to folks about the gig economy and marketplaces and stuff like that. I guess my first question, since this is titled the Gig Economy Panel, and I will pose it to both of you, is the gig up for this business model? Is it all over? Has the song been sung? Is the sun setting?
That's
Oisin?
not a good question. I don't like that question. Let's start over. Look, I don't think that we've named it the right thing. So we called it the gig economy, we called it on demand, we called it all these things. And I think part of the problem is none of them accurately represent what's going on.
Right.
So if we were to really describe what's going on, we'd say this is about taking out friction. It's friction in the selling process, it's friction in the buying process. But that doesn't sound like a particularly good name for it. So I think there's a lot of companies that have come through the last 7, 8, 9, even 10 years that have been about this convenience for customers and convenience for professionals or sellers. And whether that's Uber, Lyft, Handy, Managed by Q, there's so many companies that have taken out friction in the buying process. And I think you've seen some of these models really work and get to a place where it makes sense for all the customers involved and all the sellers involved. And others it hasn't worked. And I think that's totally normal. You take any 10-year span and any change in technology, yeah, of course, some of them are going to work, some of them aren't. And I think the overriding thing has got to be, are these models, are these businesses delivering real value for customers and real value for sellers? And if they are, it makes sense.
Dan, do you like the idea of frictionless economy or frictionless, the frictionless business model? Is that the new name for it?
Yeah,
Can we come up with a new, a new brand?
I think Oisin makes a good point around sort of like what does the gig economy actually mean, and I think like at the end of the day, removing friction is a big part of it. I also think like the one thing I would add is it's causing us to question, I think collectively, the role of the firm, and in certain industries we're seeing the firm doesn't play a huge role, and so when we're talking about taking friction out of the system, in a lot of cases we're talking about connecting a worker directly with an end consumer, and in some industries that makes a lot of sense, and in others it doesn't, and I think the promise of the gig economy was sort of this idea that made sense everywhere, and I think maybe coming back down to earth, we're realizing that maybe it doesn't, and maybe in some cases the firm does play a role.
What lessons have you sort of learned over the course of, not sort of learned, have you actually learned over the course of building the business, Oisin? Y'all started out with sort of a fairly pure 1099 model, and I'm wondering if that's changed at all, if you've done some tweaks to sort of make it more, to make it easier for your workers to be their own bosses on the platform.
Look, I think we started 5 years ago with the view that the way people buy and sell services is broken. So you think about every service you need inside your home, from home cleaners to handymen, plumbers, and it's obvious that it's a painful buying process. You're looking for reviews from family members or friends, you're looking for introductions, you're researching a bunch of stuff online, and what a lot of people don't internalize is the sellers of these services, local small businesses, people who are cleaners, great handymen, great plumbers, are going through the same thing. They're trying to figure out where can they work, at what price, with who, at what time, and they're trying to figure out how they can drive more business. And that comes in all sorts of different forms. So whether it's people saying, hey, should I buy leads from these lead gen providers? Will I be able to convert them? Should I pay for advertising? Should I pay on a per click basis? Should I pay on a per flyer that I buy? Like, you go all the way back, local business was built on flyers, on classified advertising, and that's really hard for people to know if they're doing it right. So what we've done over the last 5 years is try and figure out how to continue to build a great experience for customers, but also give great sellers, great professionals, an incredibly easy way to buy. And to us that meant onboarding them on Handy, going through a very rigorous background check and onboarding process, and then giving them complete flexibility to claim whatever jobs they want. And our biggest learning has been around flexibility. Our professionals don't want to go through a buying process to buy leads. They don't want to advertise. They don't want to do all the clunky stuff that goes with kind of that local advertising model. They just want to be able to claim jobs whenever they want and preserve their flexibility. And that's the number one thing that we thought we knew going in, but we've really learned over the last 5 years.
Has part of that been a result of, I hate to bring it up, but has part of that been a result of the lawsuit?
Look, I think so much of this is driven by actual interaction with customers and actual interaction with professionals. So we spend so much time with our professionals, we do focus groups, we do research, we do so many studies, we get in front of them so regularly, and I think that's overshadowed when you read press by, hey, so much is driven by this lawsuit or that lawsuit.
Right.
I think so much of what we've done is actually driven by boots on the ground conversations and real data rather than what a couple of lawyers want to do to make a quick buck.
Whew. Is it a quick buck? Is the lawsuit still ongoing?
Yeah. Well, it hasn't been a quick buck for me.
Dan, you started in 2014. Handy started in 2012. Did you look at their model and say, okay, there are some things in here that I'd like to tweak? What did you learn from what the market was showing you in terms of the other companies that were out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we rewind to 2014 and 2013 when we really started working on the business, I think the environment was very different. The funding environment was very different. The mandates around growth were different, and I think we saw a lot of companies, chasing the promise of on-demand, growing at all costs, and really scaling operations that weren't delivering great service to the customer and weren't sustainable. And I think, credit to Oisin on really turning around their operation over the past few years. I think at the time HomeJoy was around and there was sort of this race to new markets, and we looked at what was the actual experience you're delivering to customers, and for us, we really worked backwards from what was the ideal experience that we wanted to deliver and how do we think that we got there. When we started out, we were a marketplace for local service providers, so we worked with a number of cleaning partners in New York City, and we ultimately decided to do an experiment where we would start our own service company. And so it'll be 3 years in September or August when we launched Q Services, which is our owned and operated first-party service company. And what we really thought about was, if we want to deliver the best experience to our customers, we really need to think about what it means to be a great employer. We have built sort of our employment model around the good job strategy, which is something that Zeynep Tone at MIT teaches. And it's really about thinking about how you create a great experience for your employees, standardize the tasks they do and empower them to make good decisions, allow them to operate with Slack, provide training. And that's helped us to unlock, I think, a better employee experience. And so, for us, it was really just starting with the goals. What do we want to do? Deliver a great experience, and then work backwards, which meant, we needed to be a great employer to our operators, provide training, provide career development.
What when are y'all going to be profitable?
That was quite a pivot.
What?
That was quite a pivot.
Yeah, well, no, I had a point. Sorry, but I did have a point. There was I'll give you my logic. So the way that I was thinking about it was that y'all have this sort. There's my question. Sorry. It was what's the breakdown on your revenue between sort of how much money you're making from the marketplace business, where you're sort of offering a marketplace for services for businesses, and you're managed by Q Service. How much of your revenue is coming from which?
Sure.
There we go. Thank you. I got there.
I'm just trying to help you.
You're
tell the
super
story.
helpful right now.
Yeah.
So I think what we're trying to unpack here is does it make economic sense to operate Q Services? Is that the providing these benefits to employees, is that sustainable? Is that the question?
Well, I mean, that's where I was going, but initially, how much of the revenue comes from which operation, right? So how does it break down?
Yeah, so we don't disclose the exact numbers of where revenue is coming from in the operation, but I can say, to sort of answer the question around Q Services, the way that we think about it is our investment in our operators is an investment in two things. It's retaining the employees that we've already paid to acquire and train, and then extending the lifetime value of our clients by providing a great experience. And I think if you look at a lot of platform companies, where they're spending a ton of money is on churning service providers and having to acquire new ones, and on churning customers. And I think anyone operating a platform business will tell you that is true.
Right.
And so the bet that we made was we could change that equation through Q Services, and that is proving out. In terms of when will we be profitable, our expectation is that Q Services as a business unit within the company will be profitable within the next year.
Right. Within the next year. So my question to you, Oisin, there was an article that came out in December from Inc. that was wow, man, they really love you guys. But one of the things that they mentioned in the story was, not that I don't, was that y'all were going to be profitable second half of this year. Is that still on the horizon, or has that happened?
So I see these marketplaces as kind of three different phases, right? The first phase is, does anyone care? Like, do people want to buy? Does anyone give a shit? Do people want to buy on your marketplace, and do people want to sell?
Right.
And the second phase is, if you believe that it's going to be a winner takes most, or top three in a category takes most, you want to be particularly large. It doesn't mean you need to win, but you need to be in the top 2 or 3 players in a marketplace category to make sense, to be relevant. All of these things have liquidity effects. The third phase is, okay, let's build a long-term sustainable business with great unit economics, where it makes a ton of sense, where your customer acquisition cost versus your net rev, your contribution margin, all make sense. All those incredibly boring things that not a lot of people really want to talk about. And we've spent the last year and a half focused on those things. So we're very, very happy with where we are. Today, every city that we're in is net rev positive, is profitable on a 4-wall basis, and we expect to be profitable later this year. So we're very, very happy with where we are, and we're super happy with the trajectory we're on.
That was such a long answer to such a short question, my friend. That could have been, yes, second half.
I'm here to help you.
You're here to pontificate.
I'm here to help you.
I understand. I appreciate it. You're here for me, I'm here for you. So when you look at how the economics of the business have changed, what's really been driving down costs for you?
Look, I think it's everything. I wish it was a silver bullet. I wish we could say, hey, you know what? 18 months ago we changed this, and suddenly we became net rev contribution margin positive. Reality, it's every line. It's every single line of the P&L. It's refunds, discounts, claims, coupons, payment processing fees, customer service, operations. Every single team at Handy needed to be a part of the drive to say, let's build something sustainable. And candidly, like, it's hard work. Running these businesses at scale, running local marketplaces, running any local service business at scale, kudos to any entrepreneur that's out there running local services, because these are hard businesses, and anyone who's in it knows that.
How much of a role does automation play in the ability to drive down costs across all of these different lines in P&L?
Look, automation is a big part of it. So if you think about that phase 2, where it's just win at all costs, become a large player, develop liquidity, you do a lot of things just to generate scale, and you're willing to do the manual work associated with that, whether it's customer service calls, whether it's manually inputting orders, whether it's hand-holding customers, whether it's onboarding professionals. After a period of time, you build the technology. We're a technology platform. You build the technology that allows customers to self-serve. You build the technology that allows them to reschedule, to cancel, to claim jobs by themselves. Whatever it is, you build tech that sort of automates so much of what was done manually. It's a big part of it.
Does that mean that you now have more people who can go on Handy jobs?
What do you mean?
I mean, now that these people have been automated out of the jobs that they were doing, are they now able to be Handy employees, Handy contractors?
So we're doing somewhere between 3 and 4 times as much business with fewer people. So we're at a place where the business itself is incredibly efficient. We're very focused on growing that. But yeah, you're asking a broader question about the economy. I think we're going to see a shift in how people work as we go forward. So yes.
Dan, can you unpack? I mean, do you also see these same trends, and what do they mean for your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think Oisin articulated it pretty well. We saw in the Q services business itself, building tools around dispatching, automating of scheduling, task management, bring efficiencies to actually like the first-party service operation. When we talk about our marketplace, where we're connecting office managers with best-in-breed local service providers, the distinction, we talked about this a little bit backstage, is we're working with small businesses versus independent contractors. So these are people that have workers' compensation, general liability insurance, because we're dealing with commercial customers. When we talk about our marketplace, which we sort of slowly rolled out last year in sort of the testing and validating stage, it was incredibly manual. And so, like Oisin said, we did everything that we needed to deliver a great experience to our customers, but that was not going to be sustainable long term. And this year we've really focused on building out a lot of the tooling and infrastructure to be able to extend our platform, which thousands of office managers are logging into every day, to connect directly with the best service providers in the categories like cleaning, maintenance, IT, security, and administrative support.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but by doing that, by focusing on small businesses rather than independent contractors, you manage to skirt some of the like regulatory issues that other people have run into. Is that fair to say?
I think that is true. I think our intention is definitely not to skirt regulation. I think, the first comment
it just makes it easy. I mean, it's easier. It's an easier
We see value in working with small businesses because they are providing the training, the employment, and I think that these things are important to delivering a great end user experience.
Right.
So that was a decision that we made, really to focus on how do we deliver the best service to our customers. And I think the needs of an office are also different than the needs of a home, and the way that services are bought and managed for commercial entities is different than a household.
Oisin, how do you see the regulatory environment? I'm trying to get into that issue a little bit. How do you see the regulatory environment changing? What would you like to see from government?
I think that if you think about how we've gotten here, over the last decade and a half, collectively, we've built a push-button world. We've built a version of the Jetsons, right? Where you can have goods delivered at the touch of a button, whether it's through Amazon or whoever else. You can have services at the touch of a button, transportation, food, all of these things are push-button. And we've gotten to this pretty magical place in terms of convenience. At the same time, we've got laws that go back to 1938 governing how we're supposed to interact with labor. And then on the third piece, the motivation for work has changed. So we've gone from it being, it's pure economics, cool, I've got to earn a certain amount of money and I'm trading off in economics, to, okay, it's economics, plus there's some combination of what's my role in the world, how do I self-fulfill, am I making the world a better place? And then the third dimension is flexibility. So people are now trading actively across these things: economics, motivation for work in terms of meaning, and flexibility. You put all that together, and it's like this really hard problem to say, all right, does it make sense for benefits to be tied to an employer? Does it make sense for us to tie regulation at a state level? Does it make sense for us to think about training being linked only to one category of employment? And I think we've got this false choice right now between 1099 and W-2, and neither of them are the right answer. So if you were building it from the ground up, you'd either create a much grayer spectrum or you'd homogenize a lot more, but you'd make it more a la carte so that whether it's on Handy's side, we could offer more access to benefits and education and training and still preserve that flexibility. And that's some of the legislation we put forward in New York. We proposed a portable benefits program here in New York State, which would allow for us to really provide access to benefits and make a contribution, and we've been very forward on that we would contribute to benefits for our contractors. And we think this isn't the perfect solution, we're not saying it is, but we're 10 years into this part of the economy now. It's time we started to make some moves. It's time we stopped just talking about doing this. It's time we actually started to move forward on some legislation that get us closer to a solution, if not to the right solution.
One of the suggestions was to sort of prorate services, and if you work less than 20 hours, you would get X amount of benefits, and if you work more than 20 hours, it would sort of get rated up. Does that seem like a viable model, or would you rather see something else?
Look, we think wherever you put a cliff, there's a problem. But you look at the 29-hour work week, and you look at 26 million Americans that are capped in that like 20 to 28 hours. Cliffs cause problems, we all know that. They cause perverse incentives whenever you put limits on things. We would much rather see it be a gradient, where it was either on a percentage of dollars earned or on an hourly basis, so that everyone can benefit from us being willing to say, okay, we'll put a certain amount in to a benefits plan or a certain amount into a portable benefit system, irrespective of how many hours you work.
Dan, what's your take on all, like where do you fall on all of this stuff? I mean, you sort of see it from afar, it seems.
Yeah, so we have nearly 1,000 employees. We deal with sort of all of these, the scary thing that it is to be an employer. And I think Oisin mentioned that it, largely as the public conversation has created a false choice between W-2 and 1099, and I would add to that, and I don't know if Oisin would agree, is what we've really done is created a false choice around flexibility and good jobs. The argument that you have to have 1099 workers to provide them with flexibility is simply not true. The part-time job has existed for generations, probably back to 1938. And we have plenty of workers that, they choose their hours, they work when they want to, but they are paid as W-2 employees, and so they have the protections of employment that have been built up over, close to 100 years now. And so I think that's an important distinction to make. However, I also agree with Oisin that if we were to start from zero, we would define our categorizations of labor much different than we have. I think our approach is, let's not go the road of, deregulating and see what happens. Our approach is, we worked, for example, with the freelancers union to pass the Freelancers and Free legislation, which went into effect yesterday, which is a huge stride towards bringing some of the benefits of employment, knowing that you're going to get paid, to freelancers. And I think, we're interested in looking for ways to build up the position of freelance workers, as well as thinking about how do we make it easier for people to do the right thing and be a good employer.
Where have the 1099 or the gig economy companies been in this debate around healthcare? Like, I haven't seen them, I think, come out as aggressively as maybe I personally would have wanted to around sort of the healthcare debate. And what is the shifting sort of climate around healthcare mean for the gig economy?
I think, I say briefly, I think like the reality is, as is often the case, like there's a lot of people hanging around the net just waiting to see what happens. In our case, I can speak personally, after the new administration took office and it was clear that there would be a target on healthcare, we proactively sent out an email to all of our operators giving them very clear instructions that if there were changes to their healthcare that impacted them, if they worked 30 hours a week, they were eligible for our health insurance, and give them step-by-step instructions on how to enroll. Our view is we want to create an environment where people can be healthy and productive, and so as an employer, we take pride in the fact that we do provide those benefits.
Right.
So, our executives and software engineers have access to the same health insurance as our cleaners and handymen.
Oisin,
Look, I think we're in a very serious state of uncertainty right now. So I think at a federal level, there's just so much uncertainty, and as that washes through, as you see things come to life, whether it was the executive order on immigration, we have responded. But while there's so much uncertainty on healthcare, I think it's a phase of educate everybody involved, whether it's communicating with contractors, make sure you're informed, make sure you're doing all the research and you've put in place the relevant lobby groups. I don't think it's at a place yet where we're ready to say, hey, this is the right solution, because there's so much talk, there's so much volatility. Every single day, I'm sure something new unfolds, and I think it's really at a prepare phase.
Well, but if 24 million people or whatever the number is projected to be are taken off the rolls, that impacts your labor force, right?
It's a very, very serious issue. Yes.
Right. And can you respond sort of at the state level then? So one of the things that people have talked about is the devolution of responsibility to states as the federal government sort of steps back from some of this stuff. Is there any work underway in New York to say, okay, if this thing does happen, are there ways that we can have the state government come in and provide some sort of safety net to enable this, like freelance workers?
That's already happening. So we worked with the coalition in New York to pass one of the most aggressive paid family leave policies in the United States at the state level in New York, which will go into effect next year. It's a policy that we had in place for our workforce, where everyone has the ability to stay home with their newborn child, and we helped to pass that legislation at the state. So I think we are seeing states take action, and I personally am proud to run a company in New York City and be a part of making that change at the state level and set an example for the rest of the country.
So I'm going to leave on this quote, which is kind of a zinger, but I'm doing it anyway, and I'm going to let you respond, Oisin. But there was that huge article in the New Yorker last week or this week about the gig economy, and the author said, instead of simply driving wealth down, the gigging model has been helping to, or was helping to, divert traditional service worker earnings into more privileged pockets. Do you think that's a fair assessment of what the gig economy is doing?
Look, I think that whatever platforms we develop, whatever part of the economy we develop, we've got to make sure all sides are represented. So I think we've got to deliver something that's great for consumers. We've got to deliver something that works for employers, that works for the organizations involved. But we've got to also figure out, easily half of this has got to be figured out on behalf of the contractors, whether it's employees, whether it's professionals, the folks actually doing the work day to day. They remain at the core of what we've got to do and we've got to solve for. So unless we figure out a system, and it's got to cover pay, it's got to cover benefits, it's got to cover healthcare, it's got to cover education and training, we've got to figure out the right system, because otherwise I think we are in danger of that, but we're all actively working to solve that problem.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think we have to be like eyes wide open to the reality that we live in a world where wealth perpetuates wealth and poverty perpetuates poverty. The middle class does not happen, it's built. And in the post-war period, it was built by the unions, and I think we're seeing the unions decline. It was attached to this idea that employers provided benefits. We're one of the only countries in the G20 where employers provide the benefits. There's a big conversation that needs to happen about how do we collectively work to rebuild the middle class in America, and I don't think it's honestly something that Oisin and I can solve.
Well, but I mean,
but I think it is our responsibility.
Is the gig economy going to help us get there, or is it going, or does it sort of put a cap on how that economy can grow?
I think it could break either way.
I think the gig economy has the potential to be a force for good.
All right, we have so much more to get into, but on that we're going to let it go. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, y'all. That was great. Thanks.